Okay, this is awesome. GT7 in VR with a steering wheel and pedals. Got my rearview mirror up there. Not on a PSP. Coming out on the inside, that's right. Up to date. If you're gonna do this, do it properly and get a wheel. 100%. Woo! Give me a second. For the past week, I've been kind of shirking my real-world responsibilities in favor of diving into virtual reality with this guy, the PSVR 2, and I have no regrets. This thing is incredible. Although it can be hard to convince people this is my job. Pew, 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 pew. So, is the PSVR actually worth buying? Does it make you feel sick? Are there enough games? Is it too expensive? And if you do pick one up, will it end up in a cupboard after a few weeks, just like every other VR headset since the beginning of time? Well, let me address that last question first, because while it is definitely still early days, I think the PSVR 2 is going to be different. I am going to keep this out and keep using it, partly because there's quite a few games I'm looking forward to, but mainly because it's just so beautifully simple to set up. For the first time ever with a VR headset, and I've owned 3 or 4 in my time, I didn't even look at the manual or setup guide. In the box, you get a USB cable for charging and connecting the controllers. You also get a pair of earphones, which supports Sony's 3D audio, as well as the headset and 2 controllers. Simply plug it into the USB-C port on the front of your PS5, attach the earphones via the 3.5mm jack and then pop them in their little housing, and then follow the on-screen quick setup, which includes briefly connecting each controller to your PS5, then scanning the room, which is actually pretty cool to see as it scans the geometry and determines how big your play area is, which you can then tweak afterwards, and after a quick update, you're good to go. One cable, that's it. And yes, of course, wireless would be the dream. It's always a little bit in the back of my mind, am I going to trip over it? Do I have to kick it out a little bit? Am I going to walk too far and pull the PS5 off its shelf? Maybe, but I haven't done that so far, and the 4.5-meter cable is quite generous. But the trade-off being wired is we get a much higher quality VR experience. I mean, where do we start? The lenses, the eye tracking, the adaptive triggers and haptic feedback. And then we have the specs, which impressively given the price are on par or in some ways exceed headsets that cost twice as much. We're talking 2000 by 2040 resolution per eye, it's OLED, it's up to 120Hz, and we get a 110-degree field of view. On paper, this gives the MetaQuest Pro, which costs about $1,500, a proper run for its money, and it is a whopper of an upgrade over the original PSVR. Also, because we have eye tracking, devs can use what's called foveated rendering, so it prioritizes the image quality where you're looking, and it's just another tool for developers to get the most out of the PS5. One thing I did notice straight away is, you know that pesky screen door effect, where it looks like you have a pixelated mesh over the screens? Well, it's almost gone. I say almost because it is still there and you can just make it out sometimes, particularly on static menus, but it's much less obvious. It's far more subtle than pretty much any other VR headset I've tried. And that goes a long way with the whole immersive factor, and also makes me less likely to want to just take this off and just play on my actual TV. There's no distracting light leaking in, and it is pretty comfortable. I probably wouldn't want to spend more than, say, an hour at a time with this, but considering I'm wearing a proper headset, it is remarkably not uncomfortable. It really is hard to show off unless you're here yourself trying it, but I would say for anyone who's used VR before, none of this feels exactly revolutionary, but it's the most refined, the most accessible, the most comfortable, and also one of the best looking VR experiences I've ever had. Make sure the kids are doing okay in the back. The vibration in the wheel, any impact, you get your little rumble in your headset. This is as close to the real thing I think you could possibly get, to be honest. So, putting it on, and all you have to do is press and release the button at the back, and then pull the head strap back and pop it onto your head. Rotate the dial to tighten it until it's comfortable, then hold the button at the top right to adjust how far or close the lenses are to your face, and then on the other side at the top left, the wheel adjusts the width of the lenses. And yes, you can wear glasses comfortably. After an hour of Horizon and Star Wars, I did get a little bit sweaty. I know you didn't want to see that, but if you are active using it or you're sharing this among lots of people, wiping down the headband and maybe the rubber around the eyes is definitely recommended. Quick tip. If your PSVR 2 suddenly stops working and you write an email to Sony saying, "Oh no, I've broken my review sample," because you can't turn it on anymore and this power button no longer turns it on, I was panicking for a second. Turns out this little connector here can come out. It's just the USB-C. And so just check that before you lose your mind and start the return process. That fixed it. Also, these controllers are fantastic, and actually they have an invisible IR light band around the rim for the headset to track it. Picking them up though, and after you fumble around for 30 seconds, because I never remember which way is up, it all feels very familiar to a regular PS5 controller, albeit with a smaller analog stick. My only criticism is the battery lasts about 4 hours, which I guess is okay. I mean, VR sessions are rarely going to be as long as regular gaming sessions, but pretty much every other day I've had to plug these in to top them up.
Where the hell am I?
Now, if you're watching this thinking, oh yeah, that looks pretty cool, but I'm not going to move my coffee table, I haven't got the room for that, well, remember that you can use this in 3 ways. Sitting down, or standing still, or standing and moving. However, full motion requires a 2x2 meter play space, and even my good-sized studio here didn't quite hit that with my furniture getting in the way. But to be honest, beyond taking a few steps or ducking and leaning, you'll be quickly reminded that you're tethered to your PS5 anyway. This is not a free-roaming holodeck, sadly, we're not there yet, although you are greeted by a holodeck-style grid as you find the border of your play area. Also, initially, I kept pulling the headset up to check where I am and find the controllers and see if I was still in shot of my cameras or if I was about to smash into my TV, but then I started using the incredible pass-through camera. Just press the little button, bottom right of the headset, and you see straight through into the real world in black and white. There's no noticeable latency, didn't make me feel sick, and it is incredibly useful. But speaking of feeling sick, there were a couple of moments where I felt a little something going on in my stomach, and it's always to do with movement. Anytime a game gives me the option to move around using the analog sticks like you would in a regular game, I feel a bit motion sick. Teleporting works for me, and actually in Horizon, the option of using your arms to run, so holding square and X and then moving your arms up and down, which is absolutely hilarious by the way, surprisingly didn't make me feel queasy. And I didn't have any problem with the climbing, which is a genuinely incredible experience. Usually with VR, it's stuttering and latency in games, or going back to menus, or glitches, or even switching to the pass-through camera that can throw my brain off and make me feel a bit queasy. But I didn't have a problem with any of that here. And actually, that is quite a big deal, because the problem with PC VR, as much as I do enjoy it and it does have its advantages, it's fragmented. And that's the beauty of this system. A bit like, say, the iPhone, there's no fragmentation, there's no jank. Everything here has been designed or updated for the PS5 and the PSVR 2. You don't have to worry about drivers or different game stores, or is the game optimized for my headset? Do the controllers work? Can my PC run it well? All problems PC VR headsets have to deal with. Although, the flip side of that is the game library for PSVR 2 is much, much smaller. I mean, there's no Beat Saber or Super Hot, there's no Paintbrush or Half-Life Alyx, and there's no flying through the world in Google Earth. I mean, just look how many games there are for the original PSVR, and none of those work with the PSVR 2, unless the developer really updates and remasters it. I don't know if this VR showroom is particularly exciting. So we have 40 games at launch, and Sony are promising over 100 more are in development, which are a mix of brand new games, as well as VR updates for some regular games, and also some older VR games ported over, like we have Job Simulator. I mean, what VR headset launches complete without this? One of the first questions I had was, can I play regular non-VR games on this? And the answer is yes. When you put the headset on, you are greeted with your regular PS5 dashboard in 2D, but floating in front of your face like a big cinema screen. So if you have a small or older TV, or you don't want to distract your partner at night and fancy a quick gaming sesh or to watch a bit of Netflix, then you can pop this on, put the earphones in, grab your controllers, and then crack on in your own private world. The downside, really, of any VR is it's all a bit antisocial. It's you in a headset playing by yourself and blocking as much of the outside world out as possible. Although I do appreciate it outputs to your TV as well, so it can be fun to watch others play and their reactions. And I was very pleasantly surprised that despite standing just a couple of feet in front of my Sonos Arc, I couldn't hear it at all with the earphones in. The sound quality is decent. It blocks outside noise well, it supports the PS5's 3D audio, which definitely adds to the immersive factor, and the integration into the headset works really well. You could always switch it out for your own pair of headphones, or maybe even Sony's Pulse 3D headset, but it might make the whole setup feel a bit more clunky. My only criticism is you can't quickly change the volume. You have to go all the way into the PS5's audio settings, which is a bit of a chore. Okay, let's wrap this up. And my experience of VR has always been putting the headset on, having a few cool experiences and going ooh a few times, and then taking it off and usually spending the rest of the time giving demos to other people before finally putting it in a cupboard. With the PSVR 2, so far, and I do stress so far, I've jumped in for an hour every day this week. Some standing, some sitting, always looking like a huge nerd, and then wrapping it up, popping it on the side, and switching back to a regular PS5 controller to sit back on the sofa with Mrs. Tech Jap and play some good old-fashioned 2D games like Hogwarts and Last of Us 2. You're not always going to be using it, but it's there, it is easy to set up, and it plays really well. Now, £530 is obviously a lot of money, but, and you know this was coming, compared to any other high-end PC system where the headset alone is probably $1,500, plus you then have to deal with all the fuss and jankiness that comes with it, the PSVR 2 is a fun, accessible, and genuinely awesome bit of kit.
You win!
Is it essential? No. Will you use it every day? Probably not, but I love having it as part of my gaming setup, and I'm excited to jump in every now and then as new games come out, and for the money, I think it's actually pretty good value. Also, remember, just because the PSVR 2 is very good, it doesn't take away anything from the Meta Quest Pro and the like. They are still very impressive and more versatile VR setups, wired or wireless, and with a much bigger library of games. But at that price, it really is just in a different category altogether. But what do you reckon? Have you ordered one? Are you tempted, or are you going to give this a miss? Let me know what you make of PSVR 2 in the comments below, and also if you've got any questions or anything you'd like me to test. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.